Welcome to Real Women's Stories. This episode is all about how to navigate getting divorced.
I went through an almost 6-year divorce and I made a lot of mistakes.
You know, we're at the start of a new year and there are some people who are really finding it difficult within their relationships, and they've made that hard decision to split up. How do we prepare for divorce? How do we prepare for those difficult conversations?
I always say to people, divorce is like an express train. You know, you can't get off. You don't know when it's going to end. You can't control how fast it's going to go. You've just got to go until you get to the end of the line.
This is Real Women's Stories. I have got one of the most interesting guests on this podcast this week. Her name is Ange, and she is a #1 best-selling author. Her book is called Do I Really Hate Men? As is her podcast, which I know has been running throughout the whole of 2024. And Ange is just a massive inspiration to me. She's also a life coach and a divorce coach, and she has a wealth of information that she can offer to all of us. And I'm just super excited for you guys to get to hear everything that Ange has got to say. So how can you prepare for divorce? Let's find out. Hey Ange, how are you doing today?
Hi, Lisa. I am really well, thank you. I love this time of year, January. It's a new start, a new beginning. I know not everybody does, but yes, it's a great time of year for me. And yes, looking forward to having a great conversation with you. I'm a very big fan of the show.
Oh, bless you. A lot of people find Christmas really, really challenging as families and as couples. And it's those times where you kind of have a realization that the relationship isn't working, and it could be that both of you have that realization or one partner has the realization. And it's, for people to listen to think, how on earth am I going to start navigating this journey? How do I approach the conversation with my partner?
Yeah, it's a minefield. It really is, and you're absolutely right. Over Christmas and New Year, it can be a time when many relationships break down, or some people go into the holiday season with the thought process of this is going to be, our last chance. Let me see how Christmas and New Year goes, and then make a decision. Sometimes a big event like a holiday. Sometimes people go into holiday saying, right, okay, this is our last chance holiday. Let's see if we can rekindle, and then break up after that. So it is very much a time of year when people reflect. People spend a lot more time with family and friends. They spend more time together. So, it can be, the final stages of a relationship. But I think I would always advocate to people before making a decision. It's really important. You might not have had a conversation with your partner. Can be feelings that fester inside of you for a long, long time, because women especially make a decision to leave. It can be up to 12 months before the leaving actually takes place. So it's really important, if you haven't had a conversation, if you haven't had time to discuss what's going wrong with your relationship, to try to get it back on track, then it's really important that you do that. Now, you may have tried that over and over again many, many times and have come to the last straw, if you like. But if you haven't, I would always recommend that couples go to counselling. I think couples counselling it can be a really positive thing. Just because you're having difficulties doesn't mean to say that the relationship is over. So I think the most important thing to say before we kick off with all of the other stuff is make sure that you've done everything that you can, because it's always better to stay together if you can work it out, and a lot of times it is possible to work it out. And even if you don't work it out, at least you know that you've done absolutely everything in your power to to make it work. And I think you need to know that in order to move on. But you also need to be able to tell your children maybe at some point that, I tried everything to make this work, or we tried everything to make this work before we made this big decision to move on.
You've got to look back at why the two of you why did you fall in love? Why did you get together? Are you both on this same journey together, or has something happened in the relationship that has kind of hit a nerve and made somebody behave in a different way? Or it could be the kids. Having children is a real pressure on a relationship, and sometimes we start behaving differently. So I think you're absolutely right. I know that when I kind of made the decision to split up from my first husband, that I never wanted any regrets. I never wanted my child to ever look at me and go, Mum, did you really try? Was it right? And I think it's not fair just to walk away and just, I've heard some awful stories where someone's woken up one morning and there's divorce papers just sitting there. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And I think there are emotions involved, and you've decided to get married. You've decided to make that commitment to each other. So it shouldn't be as easy just to walk away, and you do have to go through those motions as well. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think Christmas as well highlights a lot of family situations, because it could be that maybe you don't get on with your in-laws, or maybe there's a few kind of things that have happened that people have said that make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that your relationship is at the end. You can still have a relationship outside of a massive group of family members.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would say to people, be cautious when listening to friends and family for advice, because they may have best intention, but only you know what's the right thing to do for you. And then once you get to that point where you do think it's absolutely over, then you can start to move on and start to plan how you're going to unravel what you've put together. And this could be over a period of many years, 10, 15, 20, 30, sometimes more. There is a real rise in the grey divorce, what's called the grey divorce, which is people getting divorced much later in life, in their 50s, 60s, 70s even. Once that decision has been made, then there's some fundamental things that you really need to do in order to make sure that you try to navigate the divorce in the right way. And the only reason that I say this is because I went through an almost 6-year divorce, and I made a lot of mistakes. And that's really what I bring to people, because I've made a lot of mistakes. I didn't focus on myself very much at all in that time. I just threw everything into my work and everything into my children. So I made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons. So a lot of what I share with people is, don't do it this way. What are the things that you can do to make the process a little bit easier, because it is going to be rocky, and there is no sugarcoating divorce. It can be very, very difficult, and it can be very, very emotionally draining. There's a beautiful life to be found after divorce, but people quite often go into fear from early days. How am I going to survive? How am I going to how are we going to co-parent our children? How am I going to work? How financially? All of these difficult things come up as issues, and it's just really important to work through each of them individually, but also to prioritize self-care.
If I'm someone listening and I'm thinking, it is the end of the road, we have tried, it's the beginning of the year, and I guess I've now got to start my journey. Like, is it having the discussion with your partner to say, right, how are we going to sort this out in an amicable way? And I guess if there are children involved, when would be the right time to tell the children? And also the living arrangements, do you still live together, exist together? Do you put timelines on things? Because what you don't want to do is obviously make the decision and then suddenly, and I'm sure it does happen, one partner may go, well, I'm actually not ready to move out yet because of financial reasons. But then it becomes uncomfortable for two people to live and exist in the same house, and then the kids start to feel more of that conflict. Like, what advice would you like? How would someone even start with all of that?
The first thing to mention is that there isn't one size fits all. You really have to figure out how it's going to work for you, for your partner, and for your children, because those are the three main sort of pockets of people that are really affected by this. Some couples, cannot, the other one person cannot move out because of financial reasons. So they have to sort of, stay in the house together and try to navigate that for a period of time, maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months, sometimes even more. That can be very, very difficult. So I think, trying to sit down with your partner and try to have a discussion about how these things can work out. If this has been something that's been going around in your head for quite a while, you've probably got an idea of how you would like it to work. I think it's always great advice to say, think about what's fair to everybody. So don't just think about yourself and your situation. Think about what's fair to everybody. And obviously, one of the first things that you need to try to agree on, because agreeing and communication can be very fraught at these times. But one of the first things you need to try to agree on is how you're going to tell the children. It's really important to tell the children fairly quickly once you've figured out that it is actually over. I would always recommend, if possible, for both parents to sit down with the children. That's not what I did, but that was just the situation. But if you are able to do that, where you're not going to bite each other's heads off, if you can both sit down calmly with the children, that's the best way. I would say use age appropriate words. You may have two children that are very different ages with quite an age gap. You may want to speak to them individually as well as together, so that you're speaking to them in a way that's appropriate for their age. And just try to reassure them, that it's not their fault. They need to hear that it's not their fault. They need to hear that both parents still love them, and they need to hear that both parents will always still be there for them. And the number one no, and throughout the whole of the divorce, I talk about this a lot, is please do not badmouth the other parent. Either in that conversation, if you're having that alone, or at any point throughout the divorce, and afterwards, because if you're getting divorced and you have children, then you don't really 100% divorce that person. You don't walk away from them, never have to see them again. You have to then navigate and manage co-parenting.
I always think that honesty, kids can see straight through everything, right? And I think, that their fear is that what's going to happen now. Life's about mummy and daddy being together and us having a happy family. And I know that there are lots of, but it is unfortunate that marriages do break down. But there are lots of other children who are going through the same thing. I kind of thought I was in a very different situation because I was a single mum on my own. But I think had I had a couple of kids with somebody, maybe you get a therapist involved and you have mediation, so that therapist could explain, you've been brought here today so we can explain what's going to happen. And then the two parents have mapped out the routine already and have discussed the routine already. This is what's going to happen next for the next few months. This is how the routine's going to be. And I guess even if you are living in the same house, you can still, dad will have the kids still on at the weekends and mum will have them on the other weekends. And I think that if you can slowly, show the children that you can end this amicably, even though there's a lot of tension going on, but just for their sake, that they keep that their routines available, and that, the parents still show that they love their children, because that's the problem, isn't it? When one parent starts to get angry with another, that's when the child thinks it's their fault.
So important to put the children first, but that can be really difficult, especially because if it's been a really difficult and nasty split, maybe somebody's had an affair and there's lots of bad feeling, and this does happen a lot, it really does. Then it can be very difficult to put your anger and your emotions to one side. And I always say to people, do you hate your ex more than you love your children? And that's quite a powerful phrase, really, because we should always love our children more than we despise what somebody else has done to us or what we perceive they've done to us. So there is a lot to navigate and there is a lot to communicate. So yes, I absolutely agree. I'm a big believer in counselling, family therapy. I say to everybody, even if you don't feel that you need counselling when you're going through especially the early stages of divorce, I think it's a great idea for you to help to keep you on you and your emotions and your thought processes, on a level page, really. Um, and family therapy and mediation. When communication does break down, mediation can be a great way, a little bit more expensive than being able to communicate, just the two of you, but maybe you have a family member who can help to mediate between you. That could be an option, because mediation is quite expensive. But there are different options that you can try with, when communication does break down, because it is important in those early days to figure out exactly what's going to happen for the children, and also to monitor how that is going, because just because you've come up with a plan between the two of you and you've done that for 2-3 weeks or 3-4 months, if it's not working, you need to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. And it is, if you have the children's best interest at heart, you have to take out your emotions with each other, the anger, whatever's going on, because, navigating then the practicalities of the paperwork, what's going to happen with the finances. And I think the finances are the biggest. I mean, I've seen families just fall apart, and I've just, it's just awful when money's involved and you can't come to an agreement. That's when things really do break down. What advice can you give? Like, where would people go to? I know obviously you start off with a divorce lawyer, which you have to find. um is there a specific divorce lawyers for specific situations? Can you get free help from anywhere?
Yeah, I think, I've on my podcast, I've interviewed quite a few divorce lawyers now, and um, the one thing that they all say is, their big piece of advice, if you like, is to engage with a lawyer early days, as early as possible. And that doesn't mean to say that you're going to have a lawyer do everything for you from an early position, or even that you need to tell your ex-partner that you've engaged with a lawyer, but find out where you stand. And the majority of lawyers, especially in the UK, will give a free consultation, and you need to look for a family lawyer and speak to as many lawyers as possible. Don't just go with somebody who was recommended by a friend. You need to, I made a big mistake with my first lawyer. And this is because I just had no idea what I was doing. He was recommended by a friend. I walked into his office. I couldn't speak for about 20 minutes because it was the first time that I'd actually shared with somebody, a stranger, that my marriage has broken down. I just couldn't get the words out. But what I recommend for people now is that, prepare for that meeting, write down any questions that you may have. If you can write down a timeline of the relationship, because he's going to ask you lots of questions, write down a timeline of the relationship. And if you can write down a few key things about your finances, maybe how much your property is worth, how much you're having savings, whether or not there's an agreement between you, or a prenup, or anything like that that's appropriate. But make sure that you ask lots of questions in that meeting. I didn't ask the right questions in that meeting, and it wasn't until I got to court that first time that I realized that he just didn't get he didn't get me, he didn't get what I was trying to do, he didn't understand my situation. Um, so then I had to, completely change what I was doing. It was very stressful. So yeah, engage with a lawyer. And this is free advice. You can have an hour consultation with 5 different divorce lawyers if you like. You will get a really good idea of who is going to be right for you and your family. If the more people that you see, because they do have different approaches.
The lawyer that you choose, is there a certain way that they would work that would be more beneficial to your situation, like the process?
I think the processes tend to be very similar. I think what the key is that connection with your lawyer. You need to feel that connection. You need to feel that they understand you and they understand where you're coming from, and what you're hoping to achieve. So I think the connection is absolutely key. Um, in that process. And if you speak to a few different lawyers, then you will know who is going to be the right one for you.
And I'm just kind of very interested in the fact, because you are a divorce coach.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for me, I guess if I'm thinking about going through a divorce, you don't necessarily have to have a therapist, because therapy more is about the emotional side of things. Whereas a divorce coach, somebody like yourselves, could actually help you remove the emotions, and let's look at the practicalities of things, and let's think about both of you and the children. It's not just about you, is it? Because we do get so worked up. And as you say, some people could have, partners could have had affairs, which then really puts a completely different dimension on the whole process. Are there many divorce coaches out there that do similar things to yourselves?
There are actually. There's quite a lot of people who specialize. I mean, I've been a life coach for over 20 years, about 25 years. But then when I went through my divorce and the recovery from divorce, and I started to document how I'd recovered, I realized that actually, because of my learned experience and difficult experience, that I could help other people to navigate that. Because, like I said, I made lots of mistakes. Even knowing the principles and practices of life coaching and mindset and so forth, I found it really, really difficult to see my situation clearly. And I think that's what a divorce coach really helps you to do, helps you to stay on track, but helps you to control your mind and control your emotions. Because the one thing that we only have control over is, well, the only things that we have control over in our lives is how we think and how we feel and how we act in any given moment. And there are many, many times going through divorce where those things are challenged. And especially if it's a difficult divorce, it can be really easy to want to bite back, to want to retaliate, to want to get back at the other side. They're hurting you in all of these ways that you feel really hurt. And there is a real strength in controlling your mindset and realizing that you now have no control over what the other side, I'll say the other side for want of better words, you have no control over what they do. You have no control over what they say. You have no control over how they are with the children when they're with the children. You have no control over what they've told family and friends. And I think the earlier that you realize that and just focus on you and prioritize yourself, prioritize self care, and prioritize the relationship that you have with your children, that really helps to navigate the other parts, the financial aspects of the divorce and the legal aspects of divorce. So I think working with a divorce coach can really help you to control your mind, to control your emotions. It took me a long time to realize that actually sometimes there is a lot of power in saying nothing. When you want to, bite back and you want to tell somebody why they're wrong and you want to tell somebody how they've hurt you, saying nothing, or there's the practice of let them is quite popular and quite well documented now. Just let them get on with let them do what they need to do, and focus and prioritize on yourself and your children. And that is the key, the absolute key to navigating divorce, and to keeping yourself where you need to be. Because emotions will run very high, especially if you go down the the legal route. Say you have to go to court. I was very naive when I went to court, and unless you've been through the experience of divorce, you've got no idea what to expect. And I just presumed that we would go to court, and a judge would decide what was going to happen. And actually, that doesn't really happen until way, way, way down, when you've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. Um, the court is really another very expensive way to mediate. So you have to go to mediation first, and I would say go to mediation and try to come up with your plans, try to settle in mediation and avoid going to court at all costs. That's what I would say. But as we know, that might not be possible. And if that isn't possible, then, you have to do what you have to do. I always say to people, divorce is like an express train. You can't get off. You don't know when it's going to end. You can't control how fast it's going to go. You've just got to go until you get to the end of the line. But you need to realize that one day you will get to the end of the line and it will be over and you will be okay. And working with a coach really helps you to know that you will be okay, because part of that work is now looking at your new life and planning how your new life is going to be. Everybody has the right to be happy and to live their best life. And that's where a divorce coach can really come in to help you to see the positivity in all the negativity that might be going on.
I've been divorced and you have. How do people feel? Do people feel that they failed if they've got divorced? Because I guess some people might look at their lives, especially, I guess you mentioned somebody who's been in a relationship for I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, and then suddenly decide that it's time for them to break up and they can't deal with the marriage anymore. It's that feeling of, have I failed in my relationship? What do you think? What do you think about that? Do you think people kind of feel that?
I think the majority of people feel like a failure when they come out of marriage, and this is one of the big things really that you need to work on as a person. But all the things that happen to us in life happen to us for a reason, and I think that you have to hold on to that. And if you may have children, having children with somebody cannot be a failure. And we have also learned a lot through our marriages. The sooner you can get over that and move your thinking on, the better. I think where we do fail is not getting out of a marriage that isn't right. I think that is more of a failure. It is an absolute strength if the marriage is over and you've tried everything that you can try. That is not a failure. That is showing strength.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Why sit in a marriage that you're going to be unhappy in? Find the strength, find the courage. It's that courage, isn't it? It's that, and to know that you can do it, and things will be okay in the end. There will be, as you say, an end to some kind of unhappy times, but there will be a light at the end of it, and then life will be much better for everybody.
Yeah, only you have the power to change your world. You can't just sit back and expect, big changes in your world, and having the strength to do that, and the conviction to have a happier future and a more prosperous future and a better future for everybody concerned is a real strength.
So, Ange, you are a #1 best-selling Amazon author. Please tell us all about your book.
Yeah, so the first thing to say is that, I didn't want to write a boring book about divorce because, God, nobody wants to, read that, do they? But I wanted the book to be a sort of a journey of hope. So I wanted to help people to live their best life after divorce. So it's partly how you can navigate divorce and how you can be strong through it. And I tell my story as well throughout the book so that you can see that I've been there. I've experienced it. I've had the very, very low points. I've hit rock bottom, and how I actually recovered from that. There is so much positivity in the book that really does help people to move on, and I really wanted it to be more of a self-help book, really. And the name "Do I Really Hate Men" it came because the book is mainly structured for women, although men have read it, and the advice stands for both men and women, but all of my work is structured towards women recovering from divorce. And "Do I Really Hate Men" is actually a really, really genuine feeling that you can feel going through divorce, that especially when somebody is making you perceive that this person is hurting you, and it's a really low time. So that is genuinely how you can feel about your ex-partner, and I'm sure many men feel the same about women going through divorce as well. But you don't have to, hanging on to that hurt and that hate is the worst thing that you can do for you. And I help people to release that and to move on.
Well, listen, I think this conversation is going to help a lot of people. And I know if anybody wants your help, your details will be in the show notes. I would definitely recommend people getting your book. Do I really hate men? Which I know you don't, and nor do
I
I.
don't hate men,
No, I
no.
know you don't. I know you don't. But I think your book will really help anybody who is really thinking about navigating that journey and starting it off. But thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and having this conversation with me. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really hope that it's helped some people out there. And, if it has, please share with anybody that you feel needs to hear what we've been talking about.
This episode really was about, Ange sharing her information and her journey. Ange and I had the pleasure of speaking to Ange before she asked me to guest on her podcast. And there is going to be an episode that's going to be coming out. Her podcast is Do I Really Hate Men, which is the name of her book. And we kind of went through my journey, my divorce journey, and that you can find love again after divorce. I really did open up on her podcast. We will leave a link in the show notes and you'll be able to find the episode. We are now in series 3 of Real Women's Stories podcast, and the community is growing, but we still need it to grow even further. So the only way that we can reach you guys further, the only way we can grow the community is if you do follow the podcast on whichever platform you're listening. There is a follow button and there is also a rating button. I am a coach. I have been through my own journey, and I help other women navigate their own journey with, marriage breakups or even people trying to stay together. So what I like to do is I like to offer a midweek episode which kind of delves into the topics that we've discussed in the guest episode, where I'm going to really give you some useful tips and practices and try and help you through your own journey. I've got lots of people sort of getting in touch with me, wanting to work with me more. So I would really encourage you to listen to those coaching episodes, because they do delve into some of these topics that we're talking about. And I know that they're helping you. So yeah, give them a listen, give them a follow, and get in touch with me if you do want to work with me. So I will see you for my midweek episode of Real Women's Stories. But until then, have a good week and I'll speak to you soon.